Good morning, Ursula. Thank you for talking with us today about the red shoe.
Right.
Lovely text. Yep. We've just got a few questions.
Yep.
We'll start with the easiest one first, I guess. We're here outside Caho's apartment block along Maclay Street in Potts Point, which is a significant setting, significant choice in setting in relation to your novel, The Red Shoe. What is the significance? Could you explain to us the significance of this building?
Yes, well look, the Red Shoe is inspired by an event, a historic event in 1954 in Australia with the defection of a Soviet diplomat, Vladimir Petrov. And when I was, I suppose, researching the book, I discovered that the actual defection took place where Mr. Petrov signed the papers that were given to him by an agent of the Australian government, actually took place inside this apartment block, Caho, which, oddly enough, I had a friend living in at the time. So it was one of those interesting things where, something that's almost, mythical. Actually, it was strange to go and visit this friend and think, gee, they would have walked through this lobby, they would have gone up this lift, and they would have sat in one of these little rooms, and he would have signed the papers, put it in an envelope.
Some sort of historical
event, a very, both a sort of strangely private, because there were no witnesses, but public event. An event that was then all over the newspapers, but just took place almost privately inside the room of this sort of charming old building. So, because most of the the pivotal drama where, Mrs. Petrov loses her shoe trying to get onto the plane did happen in Sydney. But the rest of the drama, apart from the signing of the document, was more, in Canberra where they lived. So, but Sydney did, and then of course, when Mr. Petrov, after he signed those papers, he would have been taken away from this building in a car to one of the various safe houses that he was kept hidden in for some months after the defection. And of course that's, so I guess this is the event, that's where the Red Shoe is set next door to one of these safe houses. So I suppose this particular event, in a way, was the event that set all that in motion, that, is essentially what the Red Shoe is about.
Interesting, how interesting.
Yeah.
Sticking with the writing process a little bit longer.
Yes, please, yeah.
Cliché.
Right, yes.
Teachers are always telling students, avoid cliché, show, don't tell, and things like that. How does a student, it's a difficult thing to tell someone to avoid cliché. What strategies, are there strategies to avoid cliché?
Look, I suppose if we're talking about clichés of expression, I guess the only strategy is some sort of hypervigilance, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like just a strong self-awareness and thinking about, is there another way to say this? I guess when it comes to expression, though, if you're too hypervigilant, I think then, because the reason a cliche is it's got some, it's got some, over the centuries, it's had some meaning to it. It's become a cliche because it's a successful expression and it means something to people. And I think the problem is when you're so hypervigilant about cliches that you almost sort of, I don't know, instead of saying as dead as a dodo, you decide to think of some extremely thing as unlike a dodo as possible, then it can become almost, the expressions can become a bit meaningless. So it's a hard thing to sort of, you still want whatever you're saying to have some relation to meaning without just sort of making it, I don't know. But to me, I personally am not so affronted, or that's not even the right word, or offended or something about cliches in expression. I'm sort of fairly, I quite enjoy certain, it depends how they're used actually. You can get a lot of humour out of cliches as well, and also there are quite a lot of, as Flaubert used cliches, his characters would say cliches as a way, it can express character the way a person uses cliches. However, that's it. I find cliches of plot and action, I think they're a bit more problematic. They're a bit boring. Do you know what I mean? When you can kind of totally, and I think what a strategy there is that I think we all have a default position, like whatever it is,
Right.
She went to a ball and saw a handsome prince or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, you sort of, when you're writing something, you do find yourself falling into those sorts of cliches, which I think are kind of, they're not very sort of discovery oriented. And I think then you can stop yourself and think, well, you don't need to write, but just think, well, you've got X, it's almost like a hypothesis. As a scientist, you've got X, and what are all the different things that could happen? Just actually explore it all a bit more, rather than thinking, oh, this is how it must be. And I think in that process of exploring, again, you get to know your characters better, and so then the things that sort of happen, they're not necessarily more realistic or anything, but they're just more surprising or revelatory of the story. So. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah. That's exactly what I want to say.
I guess it's all to do with exploring what you're capable of, rather than being satisfied with that. I mean, I suppose in primary school children, it's very interesting actually in infant school children, I find, if you're teaching poetry, because they haven't kind of settled into all those patterns, they come up with quite beautiful and original expressions for things, because they're seeing it, that they haven't learnt all the cliches, I guess. And then as you get into later primary school, they're very satisfied. The first thing they write down is that cliche, and it's almost like they can't think beyond it, because it's like filled up the space in their brain. So, but they've got a lot more, we've all got many more thoughts going on in there. So, but I think it's just a matter of taking a deep breath and trying again and again and again, making lists.